Hello and welcome to the Gang Culture Podcast, a series educating you about gang culture. Whether you're listening at home, school, or on the way to work, we hope you can enjoy listening and learn something to share with others. Welcome to today's episode, where we have the privilege of sitting down with Jason Pires, a true jack of all trades in law enforcement. With a diverse background that spans from SWAT to the Drug Task Force, and even serving as the Deputy Chief of Police at the University of Delaware, Jason brings a wealth of experience to our discussion. In this riveting conversation, Jason opens up about his time working undercover, offering unique insights into the world of undercover operations and what it's like to walk in the shoes on the other side of the law. Drawing from his experiences on the gang task force, he shares first-hand accounts on his encounters with gang members and the challenges of combating gang-related crime. But our conversation doesn't stop there. Jason also delves into the difficult topic of dirty cops, offering his perspective on how law enforcement agencies can address issues of corruption as well as misconduct within their ranks. And for those who find themselves mistakenly identified as gang members, Jason offers practical advice on how to navigate these challenging situations with integrity and resilience. Join us as we explore the highs and lows of law enforcement with Jason Pires, gaining valuable insights into undercover operations, gang culture, and the importance of integrity and accountability in policing. This episode promises to be an enlightening and thought-provoking conversation that sheds light on the complexities of law enforcement and the pursuit of justice.
Welcome. This is Orlando, back with another episode of Gang Culture Podcast, Myths and Reality of Gang Life. Our purpose is a show of empowerment and education where we break the cycle of gang violence in today's society. We have a special guest, an officer that has truly seen it all, with stories that are unbelievable. Surrounding gang activity, I'd like to welcome Deputy Chief of Police Jason Pires to the mic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody having me here.
We love having you here. And so when I was reading your bio, it just blew me away of all the things that you have been involved with and all the accomplishments that you had. And so it just really made me realize that you were definitely a man of the shield.
Yes. I was very committed to my job. I was very serious about it. And I tried to do the best I could no matter what situation I was in and make the most of it.
Yes.
And try to have an impact on my community is one of the biggest things I try to do. I was born and raised in Dover, Delaware. I went to Cesar Rodney High School. And that's where I started my policing career. It was at Dover Police, so I was actually trying to give back to where I came from.
So if I was to ask you this question here, what led you to law enforcement?
It was my brother, actually. I have an older brother, so I'm the youngest of three. My sister's actually the smartest one in the family. So me and my brother were cops, and my sister actually wound up being the dean of students down at Del Tech at Terry campus. So she taught in the CJ program, and she was very instrumental in my career too. And we can discuss that later if we get into that part of it. But I owe my sister a lot of where I am and with my success because she's the one that constantly pushed me. But my brother was the first one. He was in law enforcement, and that kind of piqued my interest. And I kind of followed in his footsteps. But now my family, I was born and raised in Dover, but the rest of my family's from Cape Cod up in Massachusetts. So the military is what brought my family down here. My dad was in the military. So we got stationed at Dover. I was born here, and that's kind of how the journey started. So then I went into the military first because I knew I wanted to be a police officer. I'll be honest, I was not coming out of school. I was not big on college.
Right.
I wasn't big on education in the sense that I didn't like the structure. I wanted to be a little more free. So I knew I couldn't be a police officer until I was 21. So I went into the military and went into military policing, and then got deployed over to the Gulf War. Had an interesting experience, and then I was stationed in Mississippi, Japan, Saudi Arabia. Got a chance to see the world a little bit, which was very eye-opening and educational. It honestly made me realize how much I love Delaware, to be truthful. You don't miss it until you're gone.
And that's what they say.
And you know, I'm a downstate kid. I'm country through and through. I got no problems admitting that at all. And then that's how it started. So then I came back. I went to corrections first. It was hard getting a job. You know, the first time I applied with Dover Police, I didn't get hired actually. So I had to take that setback on the chin and figure out, hey, how can I, you know, still achieve that goal? So I went to corrections, which was actually the best education I've had in my whole policing career. Was spending that 3 years in prison. It was very educational. I got a chance to learn a lot in there. You sharpen your people skills. As a correctional officer, it's challenging because you don't have a gun in prison, so
Right.
you have to learn how to control an environment with people who have shown the propensity not to follow the rules, and you have to be very respectful. And that's one of the things I learned about the places is you give what you get, that energy, and I carried that onto the street with me, actually. So that's why I think I was so successful in my policing career, traditional policing career, is that foundation that was laid for me in corrections. It taught me how to talk to people.
And I would agree with you, because I know one thing, that there were a lot of officers who are very respectful to the convicts and mutual, and everything goes a lot smoother. And so I could definitely understand your position on that firsthand.
Well, Delaware being small, some of the people that were in the prison were my friends.
Wow. Yes.
That I grew up, that I played basketball with.
Right.
So it taught me very quickly when you get into the prison and you see people that you grew up with that are in there that were good people.
Right.
That just made poor decisions and that got them there. So when I had that mentality in prison, as I was dealing with the inmates, I didn't look at everybody as being this terrible person. Right. I look at some people. I mean, don't get me wrong. There were some genuinely bad people in there. There were some really evil people that were in there, but others were some that just made a poor decision that completely changed the trajectory of their life. And having people that I know personally in there, it definitely helped me as far as wrap my brain around my job and what I had to do. And to be honest with you, humanizing everybody that was in there is what that did. And that helped me a lot.
I think that's a good point, because I think when we think about incarceration and the segment of police, we forget that they're humans as well.
Yes.
And so the dehumanization part, I think, is very important, and because that's where the connection comes into on both sides.
Right.
So let me ask you this question.
Sure.
What is one of the most interesting parts of your career with your work undercover as an officer?
Believe it or not, this is going to sound crazy. My favorite thing to do, the thing I had the most fun undercover, I love selling dope. Like that was my thing. Is I love that role of being the hustler. That's the one thing I liked. And in that 14-year span in our drug unit, I started off actually in our uniform side. Okay. So that we had a uniform part of our drug unit. It's more like a street crimes unit. Right. And now everybody knows it as Operation Safe Streets or the Governor's Task Force. Is what everybody knows. But I actually pioneered that program at Dover PD. It didn't exist, and I was the first officer assigned to that. So we were going into some uncharted waters there. And then from there, I did that for a couple of years, and then slid into the plainclothes side, the undercover side of it all. And with that, you have to, a lot of people, when you talk about undercovers, and I always get this question, so I'll put it out there. No, it's not like the movies. It's not. I didn't drive a Ferrari and all the other.
Miami Vice.
Yeah, I didn't. It wasn't like that. Our job, actually, believe it or not, was just to blend in.
Right.
You were more effective if you blended in. Now, don't get me wrong. If there was a situation where you needed to play a certain role that may be a little higher profile, then you would look the part.
Right.
And then other times you would just blend in. But my favorite part of my job was actually being on the other side, posing as the dealer. And that was my fun. We call that in our business, we would call that a reverse. Like I love doing reverses, where I was the one that had you convinced and you were the buyer for me. And the great part about that was, it's that chess game that you and I were discussing.
That chess game, man.
It's that outwitting and keeping in your character and staying in your role and playing the part that you got to play. But that was probably my favorite thing to do, but it's not something that you did every day. But some other aspects of it that I enjoyed was, as you and I discussed, I think that was big, and just the whole strategy of going into the job of really trying to figure out an organization, break them down,
right.
And get that off the streets, because inevitably with the drug game always comes violence.
Yes.
So we would get creative with our different ways of how we would attack that problem.
Right.
And it was situationally driven too. I want to make sure everybody knows that too.
Okay.
Depends on the case, who we were working and what we were working, as to where we would go. So if you want to repeat that question one more time for me, Orlando, if you could.
Well,
or if we want to move on to a different one, if you feel I hit all the.
Well, I do have a different one.
Go ahead.
You have a plethora of questions I want to ask you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's funny. So when you said about the role of being undercover, I thought about the movie Deep Cover, where his role ended up getting caught so into it where he
Yes.
thought he actually became that.
Yes.
Have you ever worked with any officers where that you saw that happen?
That I worked with any that
Yes.
really got too caught up in their character. No, not really, because there's a lot of checks and balances out there. And honestly,
Okay.
when we would go undercover, it wasn't because Delaware's so small.
Right.
There was only so much you can move. So I had to do a lot of my work downstate because
Right.
I was a Dover kid. So
Okay.
I couldn't do my work in Dover. And a lot of people don't understand that the relationship between police agencies is pretty fluid. So
Okay.
like the state police would get me to go downstate and do undercover work for them, or Seaford PD would call up to Dover, say, "Can you guys come down and help?" And
Okay.
we would go down there and do some of our work. Some street level stuff sometimes. We actually had a murder for hire plot, believe it or not, just like right off television. This guy wanted his wife killed, and we went through that whole ordeal of
Wow.
setting that up. And it's just, I got a chance to see a lot, but the undercover thing, a lot of people, I've seen some people get a little bit caught up in it, but not like what you see in the movies and stuff, because we never ran any long ops. Like our ops weren't that long as
Right.
far as undercover, and the way it would work too is you go in and go out. So a lot of times where I was buying or where I was going, they knew I didn't live there.
Right.
So a lot of times, my cover story could be a variety of different things, whether I was in
Okay.
town for construction or if I actually hustled over in Maryland. And, you had to think smart, because in the game, like I do, they don't want competition in their area. So they have to know definitely that I'm not
Right.
going to, we're not competing for anything. I'm
Okay.
taking this and I'm going over there.
Okay.
And that helped a lot too, because with your cover story, you had to make sure that it wasn't going to get blown apart. So, you try to be from
Okay.
places people don't know and cover things like that. But I never really saw anybody get too caught up in their character
Okay.
at all.
What type of services have you been a part of alongside your police work?
Wow. So besides that, I was on a SWAT team for 5 years. I was a SWAT guy. I was assigned to the DEA task force for 5 years, which was an interesting assignment, because with the DEA, and if you don't, a lot of times you'll see it on television. Sometimes I'll see it, but a task force, what they do with the DEA is they know that the federal government and the federal agencies know that the local police know their jurisdiction and their people and their communities better than anybody.
Right.
So what they do is they create a task force that's made up of there'll be DEA agents on it with us, but then there's also local police departments that are woven into that task force. So the thing that is advantageous for the police departments is now you have the resources of the federal government at your disposal, which the biggest one that we all know is the funding.
Right.
So to run an undercover operation is expensive. To run a wiretap is real expensive.
Right.
And that most agencies in the state of Delaware don't have the budget to do that. So partner up with the DEA, we work those cases. So some of those cases would take, I've been to Florida, over to Maryland, just working stuff. So the good part for us is it eliminated the boundaries of jurisdiction, because in the criminal world, the bad guys, jurisdiction doesn't mean anything. It means something to us. So it makes it more fluid and for us to be able to move around.
Okay, let's shift gears.
Yeah.
You were involved with a group called United Basketball Group. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Oh, you hit me in my heart right here. So Delaware United, that was a situation. So it was a team that my sons are basketball players.
Okay.
And there was a couple of AAU teams in the Dover area, and my son wanted to play for this one particular team, which was Delaware United. And I knew one of the coaches on the team, so I was like, all right, I'll get you a tryout. I get him a tryout. I just want to go be a regular parent. I used to do a little bit of coaching, like in the CYO leagues, the Catholic, the church leagues, and get him a run. The coach was like, yeah, I would love to have him. So I was like, cool. I showed up to practice just to be a regular parent, and it was ran by a husband and wife, and they came up and they approached me, asked me if I'd be interested in coaching. And I was like, nah. At first, I didn't want to. I was like, I just want to be a dad.
Right.
And then I started looking around at the team they wanted me to coach, which was a middle school team. And of the players on the team, five of those players, I arrested their parents, and for drug stuff. And I thought to myself, everyone talks a good game about giving back,
right?
But are you going to step up to the plate? And they gave me the perfect opportunity, so I jumped in feet first with this group, and I fell in love with them kids. And what was interesting is some of my team. There were some gang members on there. Definitely had some hustlers. It's crazy, middle school kids though, but it's nutty. Like tattooed and the whole nine. And when I first started coaching them, they didn't know what I did for a living, which I thought was great because I had just transitioned out of the drug unit part, and I was now in the executive command part of my career and the supervision part of it. And it was great because they didn't realize who I was at first. So our relationship developed legitimately as coach-player.
Right.
And it kind of helped take that barrier out. And then they started figuring out who I was and what I did for a living. And the beauty of it was it did not have a negative impact. If anything, kind of drew them a little bit closer to me. And
I'm sorry to cut you off. And I think one of the key things was that you were able to build a bond with them and a connection. And they saw you as first a coach and then a positive role model. And then I think so when the other parts come in, they would understand, man, maybe he can do this, but he's still a good guy. Because one of the things that I notice in our communities is that we seem to have this black eye on police officers. And we know some reasons why. But as I always said, all cops aren't bad cops, just like all people aren't bad people. And so I think that it's very important that we teach our youth and our students to have first think for themselves and be willing to trust officers because we need officers. And so I think that was very, it was good that it happened that way for you because I think as the time grew, you saw the closeness to the close-knitness with that group.
Yeah, and it also, with that trust that I developed with them, came those great candid conversations and those times that I was actually able to yank them up by their collar and point out their mistakes to them and try to point them in the right direction as far as it's concerned. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't always successful with it. I never turned anybody away that came to practice, but there's times I had to keep people out of practice for a variety of different reasons.
Understandable.
I mean, it was to the point. One kid wouldn't play defense on him. The rival gangs wouldn't play defense on him, and because the other, I'm like, hold on, time. So I had to pull them both off to the side and be like, this. When you come in this building, that doesn't exist. Like,
right.
We're a team, and let's go out here and ball like a team. And I would tell you what's great is when I coached that team, I was not a good coach. I'll be perfectly honest with you. And we still went out, entered 6 tournaments, and won 4 of the 6 that we went in. And we loved it. I had so much fun with those kids. And what I loved about it is we went in there, and because they were a little rough around the edges, tats and dreads, the whole nine. When we would walk into different places, everyone judged us immediately.
Right.
And that bonded us even more. And then we would go in with like a fierce level of competitiveness.
Yeah. I'm going to go against you and think that you were a great coach. And the reason being, so when we look at coaches as being mentors, role models. We know the sport is here, but coaches play a pivotal part in a lot of our youth's lives because a lot of our youths don't have positive male figures. And I believe that they saw that in you. So I'm not going to say that you were a bad coach. I think as time went on, you may have became stronger in your ability to coach. But I think the coaching was already done when you shared your love with these kids that needed it so bad.
Well, one of the things I did too is I recognized exactly what you said. So being in that world that I was in for 14 years, being immersed in that whole drug gang world, I knew it. It's what I knew. I knew that better than anything in my whole career. So these kids, I told you when I arrested five of their parents, I knew where they came from. I knew the projects. Right. I knew all the struggles that were in their areas that they were from. So one of the things I did is I legitimately, I made a promise to them that I would never quit on them. And I used to actually go to school. Once they realized what I did, I'd be in uniform. I would go to their school at lunchtime. And I would see who they were sitting with.
Right.
And I roll right up. If they were sitting with, because I knew everything that was going on in the streets. So if they were sitting with people that I knew were a bad influence, I'm like, no. Get up from that table. You're going to go to this table. And they're like, coach. And I'm like, get up. Which I took as a huge compliment because even when I was in uniform, I was still a coach. So I would move them over. I used to do parent-teacher conferences.
Good.
I would grab my kids, what subject you're struggling in? And they'd be like, English. I was like,
right.
Let's go up and talk to your English teacher. And we'd go up and talk to the English teacher. And I would tell him who I was. Excellent. And I would ask him, what does he need to do to get back on track? And that's kind of the role I played with them. And I would see him in the streets all the time. Because unfortunately, some of the areas that these kids were from are some of the more higher crime areas. So,
of course.
And the beauty of it was, though, when we saw each other in the streets, it was all love. They would always come up, give me a big hug, coach this, coach that. And it was just tough sometimes.
And so in a prior podcast we had, or interview actually, we had an officer here who we were talking and we were discussing the importance of officers knowing the community. So I think that was great that you were able to do that and go through the communities and you knew the people in the community, because I think that's one of the problems. I think that's where the disconnect comes into play, where we look at the officer like, who is this? But if I know you and I know your family, I know where you come from, I can pull you over and say, come here, let me up and speak to you, opposed to you holding your chest out. You know what I mean? So I think that's important.
And that in those situations, you're right. You have to get to know the community and you have to develop those relationships. I mean, let me take my Delaware United team off the table.
Right.
Let me just talk about policing, period. Right. Even though, I have a job to do, we're both still people, and you can't forget that. And you can't take out the fact that everyone's going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes, so it doesn't mean that you always have to swing a hammer every time to get the results that you want to get out of the situation. So there was plenty of times where I cut breaks and opportunities and got to know people in the community, and those paid dividends when things would go bad sometimes in the community, and you needed to talk to those people and to get things worked out. It's beneficial to have those relationships, and as you and I were talking before, it's all about mutual respect.
True.
That energy you put out is the energy you're going to get. So if you put out that crazy energy, expect it back. Right. And that's kind of where the relationships developed, and then it carried over. And with my team, as I said, I wasn't always successful, and I always kept my promises to him. One of my star players, and I'm not going to say names, he was a gang member, and I tried because even when I went to the University of Delaware, I brought him up there to show him, hey, listen, you can play at this level, if not higher, and you have an opportunity and a skill set to change your life, potentially your family's life. I mean, he was that good, and couldn't pull him out. I tried to pull him out. I would call him out on his gang stuff, try to pull him out, try and pull him out. And then, I'm only having practice 2 hours a day. I can't be with you. And I would drive him home or whatever and, give him a speech and talk to him. And they all had my number. And he wound up getting caught up in some stuff where he went to jail in a shooting. And I'm not going to say if he was guilty or not, but he did do some time. But to keep my promise, I still went and visited him in prison.
Excellent.
And we did have to have that I told you so talk. Because I 100% told him what was going to happen. And one of the things I try to stress even now to the team at the university, I mentor them, is surround yourself with people who have just as much to lose as you. And I promise the decisions they make are not going to hurt you too bad. Because when you hang around people that don't have as much to lose as you, they look at the world differently. So with that young man, unfortunately, he did do time, and I stayed with him. He got out. Went back to finish high school, and he graduated. And last I heard, he's doing pretty good, and we still stay in touch. And then I was some I've had success stories where I got him out of here, got him in the military, get him away from that situation, get him out of that environment.
Well, I think that we have to be realistic, and know that we can't always hit a home run for all the kids that we try to save. That's unfortunate to say that, but that's just the harsh reality of life these days. So I think no matter how many kids we're able to save or change the direction of their lives or the journey they want to take, I think it's a win-win, because that's one less kid or 2 or 10, whatever, that went the wrong way.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's the blessing there, and it's good that they had someone like you, and I applaud you for that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So we have some questions from our youth that we would like to share with you and get your insight on.
Sure.
The first one would be, what lessons did you learn from being the CEO that carried over to you the rest of your career?
That's you and I talked about that earlier on a little bit. We touched on it. The biggest thing is respect and communication. You got to listen as well as speak. In order to be a good communicator, you got to listen. And that was one of the biggest takeaways I learned in the prison system is, if you give that respect, you're going to get that respect. And that's the biggest takeaway. And how to effectively communicate with people. You have to learn to de-escalate situations. You had to learn, and you also had to learn to read a lot of body language and understand a lot of things that were going on that weren't spoken. So there was a lot of takeaways. As I said, that was the best education I got in my policing career was those 3 years.
This is this is a kick. I can't even say the word on here. Can you share one specific SWAT experience that you had that was badass?
Are we allowed to say that?
I don't even know.
Oh my gosh, a SWAT experience. So I wish I got some of these advanced because I'm getting old, my memory, and I did so many operations.
Or one that was troubling for you also, that was so serious that it left a lasting image. Because I can't imagine being a SWAT guy. I remember I used to watch SWAT when I was growing up, and I saw the last SWAT, but I can't even imagine being a part of that elite team.
Yeah, it was a lot of training, that's for sure. I mean, we did a lot of training, and oh man, that's a question. Let me think on that
All right,
one.
no problem.
And maybe one will pop to my head of one
Got you.
that'll
That's a
jump
fair
out.
one. Yes.
Yeah.
So you talked about Delaware United coaching the youth.
Mm-hmm.
What did the kids teach you, or did you learn anything from the kids?
Absolutely. I got more out of that relationship than they probably realized. Because, when in the policing world, it's a very suppression-based world. You don't get the chance to educate and really give back to the community and feel like you're making a difference.
Right.
And with them, what they gave me was a sense of validation of having an impact and being able to change. And what they gave me that I will never take for granted is trust.
Right.
Those kids gave me trust, and with that, I got a lot of love out of that. That relationship we had is one. Those bonds that I have with those kids still exist to this day.
Bonds,
unbreakable, and it was developed when they were teenagers, and I treated them like men, and we. And I also, was hard on them when I needed to be and soft when I didn't. But I found that they craved a lot of discipline. And out of that relationship, they taught me the biggest thing is those kids were fierce and they were fearless. And they taught me that, they live in an environment that is very negative, and the mental fortitude that a lot of them have is really impressive. Like to be able to have that mental toughness.
And if I can add, would you say that consistency on your behalf played a major part in the connection with the youth?
Yeah, yes, because even outside of the season, when I wasn't coaching them, I would still go find them. We would still hang out. We'd have barbecues. We would do things like that. So, just having that sense of validation that you're making a difference and that you're helping the community. I got that from the team, and plus we had so much fun. Like I genuinely had fun. We would road trip, and there's no parents. It's just me.
Wow.
As the coach, and I remember like in between games, I'm going to McDonald's and buying like $20 burgers and just dropping it in front of them and be like, "Let's go. We got another game in like 45 minutes." And those road trips we laugh about, and they would teach me a lot about what it was like being young. Right. I didn't know. I don't know what I don't know. So I didn't grow up in those environments or in those neighborhoods. So they wouldn't, there's rules to the game, but they taught me, what it was like to be a kid.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Now next question might be a loaded question. If you can't answer, we definitely understand here. In your time as an undercover, did you ever get busted, and what was that like?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did.
All right.
It was actually wasn't that big of a deal. I was doing street level buys, and I was in another area of the state, and little did I know that my popularity sometimes followed me. So I rolled up, and this dude sit on the porch, and I'm trying to do my thing, and he just looks at me, and is like, Jason, we're not selling anything. Right? Call me out by name, by the way.
Right.
Call me by my first name, like, Jason, we ain't selling nothing around here. And I was like, that's the end of that day right there.
No doubt about that.
I told those guys, like, that's a wrap. We're done. I'm going to head back. Yeah, it's over. I mean, it didn't end tragic, thank God.
No doubt.
But, it was more comical than anything. Like, all I could do was just laugh.
Right.
And that's all he did was laugh after he called me out. But, yeah, that was one time that I got blown.
Tell us how you felt when you had a youth that you felt or realized that you couldn't save or change the direction they were going. How did that make you feel?
Like one of my kids, or just a kid in general?
Well, any kid that was involved with you, basically.
It was heartbreaking to a degree, especially when you knew that they had so much potential and that there's so much to this world that they don't know.
Right.
And you see them making decisions in the moment that are going to have a ripple effect that it's going to haunt them for the rest of their life. So it's kind of sometimes a helpless feeling. And then, some of it comes down to acceptance too, to realize I can't save them all, and you have to want it just as much as I want it. You know, I'm going to give you the opportunity. Either you're going to take it or you're not. And if they didn't take the opportunity, it doesn't mean I gave up on them or kept trying. But there was times that I knew they were just lost. Like they were lost to the streets, unfortunately, and some are dead, some are in prison, and you know, it's sad. One just went.
Unfortunate.
One just went on a shooting spree last week in Dover, got arrested.
Wow.
After shooting 5 people, yeah. So he was on one of my kids I coached. But again, you know, I can only be there a couple hours a day and try to lay a foundation, and they're going to make the decisions that they want to make.
What is the blue wall of silence? Can you speak on that?
It's a wall that it at one point in time it existed.
Right.
I'm not even going to deny that. I'm sure back in the 60s it existed. In my career, it wasn't what people think. You know, I can't speak. I can only speak on my experience. I don't want people to think that I'm speaking for all police officers across the country. I don't want people to think that I have all of the answers. I can just tell you what my experience is as far as the blue wall of silence that people believe exists. There is a level of accountability that we have amongst ourselves, without a doubt. You know, people think just because they don't see it that it's not happening. And I understand that as far as discipline and accountability, because there are some things that are protected by law as far as discussing discipline of officers and things of that nature. But I think I already talked about this a little bit too, because people think that, again, I'll repeat that all cops agree with what everything is going on across the nation when police officers do bad things, that we're just going to ignore it. And nobody hates a dirty cop more than a good cop. And that accountability component is going to be there. I'm telling you that right now. Like in my whole career, as I told you, I actually had a situation where we had to arrest one.
Right.
One of our own. Like I actually put the handcuffs on him for some illegal activity that was going on that he was a part of and participating in. So, you know, and we were front and center, put that on blast. Like,
and that probably was a painful act, because, I mean, it's like a coworker. Because I guess no matter how close you may be to certain officers, it's still, as they say, a family. There
is
a level of it. You know what I mean?
Without a doubt. Think about this. You know, when you're going into a job where, you know, we essentially write a blank check to society saying, hey, listen, we're going to step up to the plate and deal with the things that you're scared to deal with, or deal with the dangers out there. And we don't know when that check's going to get cashed. Right. You know,
and the fact that you're putting your life on the risk for each other. That's the biggest thing, I think.
When we write that check, you know, and we're out there in the streets, yes, my life literally
is in my hands.
Has been in other people's hands, especially in the game that I was in.
Right.
You know, when I'm out there with the wire on, and, you know, people are thinking I'm one thing and I'm not. And I'm counting on 3 or 4 people to make sure
you're good,
that I, you know, get out of there safe. And same thing in the SWAT world. You know, like the teams are really tight for a reason, because, you know, when you go into those situations, you know, into those dangerous, stressful, you know, situations, that bond develops. And it doesn't mean that we're going to be silent when one does wrong. That's not going to happen. I mean, people seem to think that exists, and I'm not saying it never has. And also it's situationally on which department you're in. Each part of this country, policing's a different culture.
Right.
South is different than the Northeast. Northeast is different. Like, we're different up here than the Midwest, the West.
Right.
Like, each one of those has their own different cultures. Then you go into each police department. Each police department has their own identity and culture. So everyone seems to want to paint us with this broad brush, and it's so complicated. Like, we are not what everybody sees on the outside, but it's unfortunate because the media has control a lot of that narrative. Now with social media, we're actually kind of being able to push back a little bit on some of that narrative. But the blue wall of silence is an old school, very old school thing that existed definitely back in like, you know, the Jim Crow era and all that time. Like, it was there. As time has progressed and we've evolved as a profession, and understand the need for that transparency and that accountability, and to make sure that we're putting officers on the street that are going to do the right thing. That blue wall of silence is not there. I mean, at least I'm speaking for my community. I'm not speaking for any other police department across the country. I'm just going to speak for my situations and my experience. So I want to be clear on that. I don't want everybody to think I'm speaking for everybody. Just like I told, I don't want to be blamed for all the officers. So don't think I'm speaking for all of them. You know, I'm speaking for
you heard that out there from Officer Pires.
Yes.
Pires, rather. Sorry, I messed the name up.
Yes, sorry. Yeah. So
the last question I have for you: how do you view, or how do you see the gang culture with the territories in the state of Delaware?
Yeah, that's dangerous right there. And that's one where once you, for lack of a better term, once you pick a team, you got to know there's rules that come in that game.
Right.
And some of the rules are where you can and where you cannot go.
Right.
And if you're affiliated with certain gangs, you have certain areas off limits to you. And you should know that in the streets. But yeah, when I was in Dover's very segregated as far as gangs were concerned. Now, if you weren't in the gang, you could move anywhere you wanted to. They really don't care too much. And I'm sure you know that very well. I know if you're a civilian, quote unquote, you know, they may look at you as prey sometimes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be attacked or confronted just because of your affiliation. So Dover's very separated, and this gang control this area, this gang control this area, this gang control this area. And if there is any infringement on those boundaries, that's where a lot of the violence. I tell you, so many people think in Orlando, you know this, Delaware, we don't color bang.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just because you're blood, I'm a Crip, doesn't mean we're automatically going to shoot each other.
Right.
A lot of the situations that I saw flare up in Dover, respect.
Right.
One disrespects the other. Egos get involved.
Of course.
And I'm going to tell you kids right now, most of y'all can't fight nowadays. Everyone wants to just pull
they
out
want
guns.
to shoot. They can't hold their hands no more. That's dope.
You can't shoot a fair one.
Yeah.
At least back in my day, you shoot a fair one, you may get your ass whipped, but you come back the next day.
You know what he said in Friday? You live to fight another one.
Yes.
He said, y'all punks.
Yes.
They pick up a gun so quick. Human life seems to have no value these days.
It's and again, let's go to the social media, video games, and all that stuff. I mean, look at it now. Look at just how many mass shootings we've had.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's not gang related, by the way. I
right.
know we're going down a rabbit hole.
That's a stupid related.
Yeah, but I'm just saying we're going down a rabbit hole with that.
Right.
But territories in the gang world is everything, because the reason why is, you know, like I do, you set up your territory. Right. That's a safe space. Plus, that's your market depending on what you're doing. Right. So if I'm hustling, right, and as a gang, I saw that most of, like, we had some drug crews that were flipped by Bloods or Crips or whoever it was in Dover because they were making money.
Right.
So they want that territory to protect it.
Right.
For the money purposes.
Right. And about control. Yeah.
Control the money.
Pocket.
Yep. And that's you know, people are sitting there fighting over things they don't even know, and they don't know those blocks. You know what I mean? They don't know that. Yeah. So territories come in. That's just where they live, where they set up, and it's real. Those boundaries are invisible to everybody else, but real in the gang world. And those ones I've seen with my own personal eyes make mistakes, and it cost them their life over that. So I don't need to get into all those war stories, but you can check the news articles from in Dover from like about 2000, jump in there about 2004 and fast forward about 2010, and you're going to see a lot of things that are coming around that were gang related. And I will say that as the agency, as I discussed earlier, you wouldn't believe how much buying I had to get from my own officers to convince them, no, these are gangs. Right. And they're like, nah, the gangs don't exist in Delaware. I'm like, nah, they're real. They're here. So, and then that's when I had to teach them a lot of the territories and really started building. Now you go down there, unfortunately, it's woven into the fabric of the community, and those territories are real.
Why do you think kids are drawn to gangs to the level these days?
Wow, that's a complicated, multi-layered question you just asked me. So we can approach it from a few different ways. You and I growing up, we didn't have social media. No. We didn't have those social pressures, right? And you, as you were talking before, you were from the Bronx, and in the city there, like any place, you have your neighborhoods, and you have a lot of different things that go on in those neighborhoods. So why I would tell you one gang member I interviewed, it was very compelling. And I talked to him. He was actually from Jersey. He was a Jersey kid, and he was going to school down our way. And I got a chance to, one of the officers that worked at that school was like, hey, kids, he wants to get away from that life. Right. And that's why he came to school. But he's a great source, and he'll talk to you about anything. And this is when I was still getting in the game, learning the gang world. And he was a Blood. And I asked him that question, why'd you get in the gang? And his exact words were, I was tired of getting beat up every day. And he said, I would get off the bus and I would walk home and I would get beat up. And he said, my cousin was a Blood. Right. And my cousin told me, you join us, that doesn't happen anymore. Right. You don't have that problem. So he said, I joined. He goes, then when I got off the bus, those kids walked to the other side of the street and stayed away from me. So Some of it's a sense of identity, some of it's a sense of belonging,
Right.
a sense of security, some safety. Like let's look at it in so complicated. MS-13. Let's talk about them real quick. Right? They're a California-based gang that have obviously migrated across the country.
From El Salvador, I believe.
There you go. You nailed it. El Salvador. So most of them now that you find are El Salvadorian, Honduran, or Guatemalan. But
Right.
El Salvador is where it started from.
Yes.
So how they got formed? They were fleeing the Civil War in the 80s. Went up to California, right? Go to Southern California. They start getting victimized
Right.
by all the Mexican gangs in the Serranos. And so they formed out of protection.
Right.
To protect themselves is how they formed, and that's how the gang was born. So sometimes there's so many different motivating factors behind it. And then I'll be perfectly honest with you. Let's talk about the hip hop culture in the world that glamorizes that lifestyle.
Right.
And that sucks a lot of them in. A lot want to emulate what they see
Right.
and what they hear. Just like you and I growing up, we had our influences. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, so I'm an 80s kid. You're like a little bit older than me, right?
Don't tell everybody.
So I was an 80s kid, and to give you an example of the influence, come on, Michael Jackson.
Right.
I had the glove, the jacket.
See, I
you know what I
didn't
mean?
go that way.
So I was in middle school at the time.
Right.
But what I'm getting at is, that has such a tremendous influence on you.
Right.
And think about all the fashion of us growing up and everything. A lot of musicians influenced a lot of what we did, what we saw in the movies.
Yes.
And when you have now, with all of that in the palm of your hand at an instant, you hit a button and you can see all this stuff. And you have people out there glamorizing this lifestyle and making people think what it's not. And you and I know the grittiness of it. Right. And all they see is the glamour. And they get sucked in.
Yes.
And then next thing you know, you
caught up.
You got into a world that you didn't realize. Let's look at Tekashi 6ix9ine, right? Let's talk about his story. That young man was not a gangbanger.
Right.
He gets into the rap world, gets involved with the Bloods. Next thing you know, he's sucked up in this, getting kidnapped, and he's going to prison, and then he winds up flipping, and it's just like complicated situation. So he got sucked in by the glitz and glamour of that gang life, plus the protection that they offered him.
Right.
And it's I personally think a lot of what we see with this generation now is definitely glamorized in the movies and music, and they get sucked in. Social media is just, sometimes I always say smartphones can make you dumb. And in some regards, I see that, and the social media things I look at on there, I'm just like, that's crazy what these kids are watching.
Look at everyday life. So people driving, everybody's on the phone. People walking down streets, going to the store and the malls, they got the phones up and everything. The phone thing has just turned into a whole different beast. And it's crazy nowadays.
Yeah, and then if you look at this generation, everything's at their fingertips. They want everything instantly. Everything now, everything now. So then you don't have the patience. That's where you're seeing a lot of the conflict come in, and then it starts on social. Like little chirping
social
back and forth,
bullying.
Yeah, it starts chirping back and forth, and the next thing you know, it spills onto the streets, and then it gets real.
Yes.
And also, I think gun violence is on the rise. In my career, in Dover, it was there, and by the time I left, once gangs hit, because that's an interesting aspect of where I grew up. Is I grew up in Dover, as I told you, born and raised. Gangs didn't exist.
Right.
Did not exist down there at all. We had the biggest rivalry we had is Dover High and Cesar Rodney High School. The two schools that get along.
Schools.
You know what I mean? And that's little high school,
Right.
little West Side Story kind of vibe. But other than that, there was no street gangs. They didn't happen. I mean, you had a couple of drug cliques,
Right.
a couple of drug crews that were around, but no street gangs. Then in about 2002, 2003, a rash of violence broke out. And at the time, I was in our drugs vice. Our technical term is drug vice organized crime. So the gangs fall under the organized crime aspect of it. And all this violence broke out, and we had no clue. And it was a murder. It was a shooting, like 2 shootings, stabbings. It just went crazy. And I'm not going to say the specific part because I don't want to damage any brands out there. But happened, and what we did is we did a great job policing it. Like as far as actually investigating it.
Right.
But because we'd never seen gangs before, we didn't even consider the aspect of it. And I started looking at some things, and I went to my boss, and I got to give them credit. I was like, I said, I think this is gang related, but I don't know what I'm looking at.
Right.
And then, much to their credit, they sent me off to a bunch of schools. I come back, and then I start looking at some of our cases, and I'm like, oh, this is all gang related. And the next thing you know, Bloods came in and changed everything.
Yeah.
And
it blew my mind when I realized, when I came back to town and saw that there were Bloods in Delaware. Because, when we look at Delaware as Delaware, not a gang type of place
No.
for the most part. And so when you realize that the influence of these gangs these days, all you can do is scratch your head, and like you said, these young youths, they don't have a clue of what they get involved with. And so,
plus when it's glamorized on
Yes.
everything they're looking at,
You're right.
and that's the part. So now if you go to where I'm from Dover, 90% of the violent crime is gang related.
wow.
Other 10% is probably domestics,
Right.
but it's gang related. Like everything, shootings, everything down there is gang related.
Right.
Even when I started, like towards the tail end of my career, everything gang related. All the
and
shootings.
sad. And the thing about being in gangs is they don't realize that it just doesn't affect them. It can affect your family members. We think about all the innocent bystanders and things of that nature. So the one thing that I always try to tell the youth is try to be a leader. Stop being followers. Don't be afraid to be alone. That's one thing I always tell them. Don't be afraid.
That,
to be
you know what,
alone.
you brought up a very valid point, and I think that is very prophetic to say. Like, and I think that's what they need to understand. Is it's better to be alone than to be involved in something like that. If that's what you're looking for, that sense of social acceptance. You're talking about why other people join gangs. The stats are out there with the broken homes,
Right.
The no father figures, and some of the gang members I would talk to, that's all they had for family.
Right.
Like that's it. And that's who looked out for them. Like
Right.
if they knew if I got into a serious situation and I needed help, let's say it was even I'm hungry.
They
Gang
have-
would feed them.
Right.
They, that's all they knew. And so for that sense of family and belonging is why some people join.
But the only bad side to
there's
that
a lot of
also,
bad.
yeah, let's get that right, is that the older ones take advantage of the young ones also because, like you said, they want a sense of belonging. They want a sense of identity. I'm putting a couple of dollars in your pocket. I bought you a pair of sneakers now.
Absolutely.
And nobody else was doing this, so they feel like the gang has my back. Not realizing the gang is really using you
100%.
or going to use you or put you in a compromised position that may cost you to take the life of someone or get you to lose your life.
Right.
And that's the sad part about it. And so
And Delaware's adjusted, by the way, for that. At first, we just had a straight gang law, right?
Okay.
And now they have a gang promotion law too. That if you are soliciting juveniles to become gang members, that's another crime.
wow, I did not know
So
that.
yeah, they got that on the books, and it was interesting because before I came here, I was like, let me rewind the clock
Right.
and refresh my my memory on some things. And I went back and looked at the gang law, and I saw the new one that was added in there, and they've also kind of changed what the existing one is to make it a little more encompassing of what they're trying to police. So.
Right.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You're right, because as kids growing up, we're talking about the people you look up to in the neighborhood and everything else, and yeah, they will definitely take advantage and manipulate. And I would tell you on the reverse side, right? When I was growing up, there's one person, and I to this day, I thank this man every time I see him. And he was in prison when I worked in the prison, and I thanked him then too. Is when we were younger, he was a little bit older than me. He was that old cool kid, great athlete. I looked up to him, pretty girls, the whole nine, and. He was involved in that rough side of the life. And I was like, I want to run with you guys. And he refused. He would send me home. Like we would be at a dance, right? And he knew things were going to go bad. He would legitimately grab me and send me home. And he's like, nope, you're not going to be part of this. And because of that, I credit him also for where I am, because he made me turn that corner. Like he wouldn't allow me to get into that world. Whereas on the other end, you have some people pulling you into it.
Right.
He wouldn't even allow me to remotely get close to it and said, you have too much to offer. Like this
And
ain't
you know
for
what's
you.
crazy? You were very lucky, but the luck wasn't luck. You were smart enough to realize what he was doing for you. I remember in my younger days, I played basketball and football and things of that nature. Had a lot of people in my ear telling me, to stay straight and everything. But, when you're young, you think you got all the answers and everything. And I didn't take heed at it, and it caused me to use a great proportion of my life being incarcerated. You know what I mean? And so what I would say to the youth is if you have someone that's trying to give you the blueprint to not being perfect, but a level of success, don't be afraid to listen. Don't be afraid to take it, man, because they've been here. We always think old people don't know nothing. How do you think they got old? By knowing things.
Exactly. And you and I know also that people, places, and things.
Right.
So when you're talking about, I know that everyone wants the magic answer of like, yo, how do you combat this? Like, how do you change it? I mean, a lot of it has to come down to the person wanting it for themselves.
Right.
But a lot of times, if you can remove them from certain environments, it'll allow them to change. People are a product of their environment. Some are.
True.
And some, yeah, and some of the stuff that we see with the violent crime and some of the gang stuff is strictly survival.
Right. Right.
And I understand that, and sometimes you have to take people. That's what I try to do with that basketball team, is take them out of that bubble and let them see what else is out there in this world. There's more than just these 3 blocks that don't even belong to you.
Of course.
You don't even own the property you're living in. So there's more than that in this world, and let me show it to you. And I could have easily been you, but here's the decisions I was fortunate enough that I made, and I had certain people that pushed me in certain directions. Right. And so with that, I try to explain that to them, and I would even bring them to my house, like barbecues at the house. This is my house. This is the cars I drive. This is what I have, and you can have it too. That's what I tell them. There's no cheat code. The cheat code is hard work. Put the work in, and you'll get that return on your investment. So, that's sometimes I find, to help combat that, you have to give the kids something to do also.
They have to have something to do.
And the something to do is not sitting on your phone.
Right.
Oh, you have to have something to do. So, idle mind is dangerous. That's what I'm gonna tell you.
Yes.
And I got in more trouble as a kid when I had nothing to do, and I had my fair share of being in trouble as a kid. Right. And I was a little rough around the edges, not in the sense that I was really bad, but I like to have fun, and I pushed the envelope a couple of times. I'll put it this way: the first time I was in handcuffs was not in training. How about that?
Wow.
So that gives you an idea of my youth, but I wasn't a violent kid at all. I was actually just I like to have a lot of fun, and so mine was more mischievous stuff that got me in trouble, but nothing too serious that knocked me off my trajectory of the path I wanted to pursue as far as career wise.
So let me ask you a question: what made you want to join the gang unit?
Honestly, it like you and I were talking about before, it was something that I felt. I liked the aspect of the chess game of the job. Like I liked it. It was challenging. Right. It was very challenging to me because it's you against another trying to figure out. They're trying to stay one step ahead of you. You're trying to stay one step ahead of them, and then also people are pumping that poison into the communities, and you gotta. I felt I grew up there. I got to try and make a difference, and I felt that was one thing that I gravitated towards. It was something I felt because of how I grew up and the things that I knew that I could be real successful in there and make a difference. And went out there and one thing led to another. And I was, had a difference, but it's kind of like, man, it's kind of like, putting your finger in that dam that's going to break. You plug one hole, another hole opens. Plug in one hole, another hole opens. And then it's ever evolving, never ending is what I've learned about it. But that doesn't mean you stop trying, to get that out of there.
As always, use this word redemption. I read a book on Tukey Smith, who was the founder of the Crips. And I talk about this a lot. And his book was called Redemption. And so I always try to hold on to that moniker because when I look at my life or the poor choices and the decisions that I made that cost me to spend over 36 years of my life incarcerated. It blows my mind. I sit back now and wonder, how did I even do it? Right. You know what I mean? But it was not being able to be my own leader, my own self. I want peer pressure, the things that these kids get involved with. And it's crazy. I don't have a sad story coming up in a poor family. I came up in a pretty decent middle-class family. My mother worked for General Motors. My father was an electrician. Had older brothers to work. But it was that peer pressure that made me want to be something that I really wasn't. I didn't see it coming. And then let's go back to the product of the environment. I'm seeing the guys with the jewelry, the nice cars and everything, the girls and everything. Yep. And so I'm getting closer to them instead of staying the course of my education and playing sports like I was. So I always tell the youth, like you say in the chess, does the move you make sense? Right. Ask yourself that. Does going in the store and you don't see anybody there, does it make sense to grab something and put in your pocket not realizing it's a camera right above you? You know what I mean? Or you got the money in your pocket that you could have paid for it. And so we have to make better decisions and we have to change the mindset. But
and that's the challenge. That's very challenging to change that mindset. And you have to, with me and my kids, I kept my thumb on them. Like They didn't make moves without me really, knowing what moves they were making. I did a pretty good job of that, and they've turned out as decent people. One son's playing college ball up in Philly, and my other two are in college right now at the University of Delaware. So
great job.
Well, it's hard work. I can tell you that right now.
Doubt.
And they have a great mom. Even though it didn't work out between her and I, she's still a good woman, and she's a tough mom, which I like. So
that's what they need. We need tough love.
Yes,
tough love.
And there's times where her and I we have a great balance in as far as raising them. So but even then it was a challenge. It's a challenge, and now I got remarried and I hustle backwards. So I got 14 and 15-year-old now. So now I'm going through what I've already went through, but now with this generation, which is, because my kids are 21, 22, and 23.
Right. My
biologicals. Now I hustle backwards to 14 and 15. And I'm like, So it's funny when they try to go down certain paths. I tell my wife, I was like, I've already been down this one with them. Let me snatch them. But one of the things that I do with them though is I give them the same lessons that I give my kids.
I don't think the lessons change.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. Generationally speaking, it doesn't. And I try to teach them right from wrong. I try to teach them what I know about the streets and how to read them and everything else that comes with that. So it's tough being a parent because your heart's on your sleeve all the time. But
so let me ask you this. Importantly, is there anything that you would like our young listeners to know that you would want to share and impart on our youth that are listening about their level of gang, about making the right decisions, and about also not being afraid to seek help from elder people?
Yes, that's all right. So one of the takeaways, you touched on it too. Be your own person. Don't be a follower. Don't be a leader, and trust your gut. Right from wrong.
Right.
And I see too many people that try to make wrong look right and glamorize it on social media, and just know that everything on social media is not real. Nobody lives a perfect life every day.
Yes.
It's impossible. So, I would encourage them to think for yourself. Come up with a plan. Like, what is your life plan? And when you come up with that plan, what are the steps that you need to take to execute that plan to get where you want to be? And then once you figure out that blueprint, stay on course. You're going to have plenty of things that are going to trip you up in life. You're going to get pulled in the wrong direction. You're going to make mistakes. We all do. The world's an imperfect place. Screws fall out all the time. Things happen.
Yes.
But I've learned that my most defining moments in my life and in my career have not been when it's going good. It's when it's going bad. That's when you see what people are made of.
That's the true character building part of you. I think as humans and young men and young women, when we're maturing, it helps define who we are and who we may become. And so I'd agree with you.
And the other thing you talked about too, like with this generation and with this youth, I notice, and this is my own experience, is mental health issues are on the rise, and I think social media has a lot to do with it and a lot of the other things. So with our youth, don't be afraid to say I need help.
Right.
Don't be afraid to say I need help, and I think that's where a lot of people get in trouble as well. Is they're afraid to ask for help, and sometimes it forces them down that road that you and I were discussing, because then some people will start self-medicating, and next thing you know, they got that dragon that they're chasing. You know what I mean?
I see it all the time in the community. As I said earlier, I do community work, and mental trauma is very heavy, and it's really sad to see so many young people who are homeless these days with mental health issues and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be concerned about that and try to give as much help as we can to those that we may, acknowledge to have those type of issues. Right.
And I'm not saying gang members are crazy. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying. So I know the crux of what we're talking about is the whole gang world. But let's just talk about crime in general. Whether and honestly, this discussion is more about decisions, and that's where I'm trying to go with this is that, like we discussed, you're free to make whatever decision you want to make, but you're not free from the consequences of those decisions. So, with that, I think some people have to recognize, who they are and accept it and be that person and own it and come with that plan. Everybody has the ability to be great. You know what I mean? Nobody can be perfect, right? We all strive for perfection in an imperfect world. You can never be perfect, but you can be great. And the thing that you have to do is just you have to set those goals and stay true to course.
Yes.
And it can be challenging with all the distractions out there, 100%. And it's not easy. And you know, we're sitting here talking about it, and you know, it's not easy. Like even where I've gotten to in my life, and I've had a very good life so far. You know, I'm 52 years old. I've been very blessed with a lot of success, and came from hard work and surrounded myself with some good people. And that's what I would say also to this youth: surround yourself with those positive people. You know, those negative people when you see them. You know, stay away from that negative energy, and surround yourself with positive people.
And you know, on that note, it's like they say, like-minded people. Lawyers stay with lawyers. Doctors hang with doctors. Athletes hang with athletes. You know what I mean? And smart people hang with smart people. Right. They don't hang with dumb people. You know, so we need to understand that and be able to see that. You know, one of the things that I would like to say is we thank you for taking your time and sharing so much of your life, and there's so much more to you that we haven't even scratched the surface. But I'm pleased to have you here. It was a pleasure having you here, interviewing you, having this I don't like using the word interview, conversating. I love. But just for our youth, just to know, don't be afraid to talk to the officers out there. Don't be afraid to talk to the teachers out there, your parents. You know, they're there for a reason. They want to help you. Just don't be afraid to ask for help. You know what I mean? And if you're doing great things, keep doing great things. As I told you earlier, I have a motto: choices, decisions, and consequences. You're going to have them the rest of your life. Right. Choices, decisions, and consequences.
And one thing I want, if I could touch on one thing too that you just brought up is as far as majority of the police in this country, it's unfortunate that we're painted in the light that we are a lot, and majority of this police in the country want to help, but the youth need to also do their part, you know, and that's not, reach out. I mean, that's why the police athletic leagues exist. You know, the PAL leagues are out there and everything else. It's because the majority of the police, in order to be effective, you need to be part of the community and know your community. So that's why they try to get those bonds and break down those barriers. And it can be challenging, but the one thing that I want people to remember, and you said it too, that you know, I have one of the few professions where I get blamed for things that I've never done.
Wow.
I've never been to Ferguson.
Right.
Never.
Right.
I've never been to LA.
Right.
Right, with Rodney King. But yet people want to paint us with the same brush, and for some reason they seem to think that all police agree with that stuff, and it's not true at all. And like you and I were discussing, it's not really, to me, it's not fair. Like, Orlando, I would never hold you accountable, nor do you want to be held accountable for what all black people do in this country.
Of course.
No, then why don't hold me accountable for what all police do?
Right.
Look at us as individuals, and I think that'll help as far as breaking down those barriers in those communities. And don't get me wrong, there are some cops that are complete jerks. I'm not saying that at all. Like, there are some bad cops out there that have done some terrible things in the community, and I'm making no excuses for them. There's nobody that hates a bad cop more than a good one. Nobody. And people seem to think that we agree or that we co-sign all that nonsense. That's crazy. Like, no, absolutely not. So when we see things, the good ones, we get even more angry than everybody else does. But for some reason, people want to lump us all in together. Right. And I think that is one of those things that kind of gets in the way of people not looking at us as people and humans. And again, to circle back to that basketball team, that's one thing I was able to teach those kids. And I had some of the hardest kids. I mean, the hardest kids in the city were on my team, but we learned and had some great discipline. But they learned to trust the police, and that's hard. That's
one of the most important factors.
And I'm gonna tell you, that's a hard thing, because the police have to do our part to get out there and make those connections and develop those relationships and spend time with the youth. There was one kid that I met him when he was 6 years old. He played against my son, and he came from a rough neighborhood in Dover. And I loved his tenacity on the floor. The kid was a pit bull. Like, just his motor was nonstop. He was fearless, twisted his ankle. So I go over with a bag of ice, and I'm sitting down talking to him. And I was like, hey, where you from? He tells me what hood he's from. And we're talking. I was like, all right, bet. I was like, how you feeling? He's like, good. I was like, hey, one day I want you to play basketball for me. He's like, all right, we talk. I would go to that neighborhood and wait for him to get off the bus. Wow. Just to show him I meant what I said. Right. How was your day? What you up to? Dap him up. Boom. I'll see you on your way. Because I know in the neighborhood he can't talk to me too much. Right. I know the rules. There's rules in the streets. No doubt. So I would dap him up. He'd move on his way. And then fast forward probably about 5 years, I was coaching him, and
Wow.
that young man to this day, he's now a proud father and has a career and kids and the whole nine. So he's one of my stories that I love, and that was me putting in the effort though,
Right.
of going out there.
And sometimes we have to do that extra effort.
You have to.
Some people need it.
You have to. So what I'm getting at is we have to do our part as the police,
Right.
but we need the community to do their part as well.
Exactly.
And when you see wrong, tell us when you see wrong so we can get it out of there,
Right.
and keep those negative people away from our kids.
So let me ask you this last question. The youth on the street
Mm-hmm.
getting stopped, what would you suggest to them how to, I have these conversations with youth all the time. If you get pulled up by the police, you know what I mean, don't be belligerent, you know what I mean, do what they say, listen to them, you know what I mean, don't hold your chest out while you pull me to the side, because that's not going to help. What would you suggest to the kids? That's
a great, we could have a whole podcast on that. I'll be honest with you. We could sit here and have a whole conversation where we can talk about knowing your rights,
right,
when you get pulled over by the police, because some people don't know their rights, and they don't know where the boundaries are,
right,
what the rules are. So if you get pulled over, I would say this, because I was working undercover for so long, and I would tell you, I didn't look like a cop. The cars I drove did not look like police cars,
right.
So I would get pulled over often, and that was because a lot of cars I drove, the tags were not right.
Right.
So if the police officer got behind me, I knew if a marked car got behind me and they ran the plate, I was getting pulled over. So sometimes you don't have the ability to break character. So I would tell you what I do. I would roll down the windows, all the windows of the car. I would put my hands outside the windows.
Right.
So as he walked up, because all my windows were tinted dark.
Right.
So when they walked up, they could clearly see my hands. And then I would just listen to him. I would ask questions, and I would tell people all the time, and it's more of a street term than anything, but don't hold court on the side of the street. The cop's not going to have that discussion with you on the side of the street. Take that if you feel that you were not pulled over for a legitimate reason, then
right,
take it to trial.
Right.
Go to court. If you felt that you were mistreated,
right,
as far as how the officer spoke to you, whatever, file the complaint. The beauty of it now, this is the beauty of it now, is actually the state of Delaware is now mandated that all police officers have to have body-worn cameras. Right. And there's going to be a standardization of rules as far as that is concerned, as far as activations and all that. So what society, what the studies have shown is that the body-worn camera is a great behavior modification tool, not only for the person being recorded, but for the police officer.
Right.
So what I would encourage people to do is, yes, you can record us. Record it. Record the traffic stop. 100. Delaware is a single-party consent state. You don't even have to tell us you're recording us.
Right.
I would tell you, record the traffic stop. But remember, it's going to capture you too.
Right.
So at the same time, be conscious of what you're doing. But
right,
I would sit there and put my hands out the window. I would just tell the officer, hey, listen, what do you need from me? And he would say, I need your driver's license. I would tell him, my driver's license is in my back pocket. Can I reach for it? Yes. Then I'd move. And my driver's license. Then he asked for, I need registration and proof of insurance.
Right.
I would tell him it's in the glove box. Can I reach for it?
Right.
And he would say, yes. I would get it out. I would hand it to him. They tell me why they pulled me over, whatever the reason may be. If you have questions, you can ask questions,
right,
and it's all, we talked about that energy, so the energy you give is what you're going to get.
Sure.
And you're not going to get much on the side of the road sitting there screaming and yelling. It's not going to happen. It's not. You're better off trying to have that conversation and accepting if you were wrong too. The other thing is, if the officer pulls you over for something that you legitimately did,
exactly,
you got to own it. You have to, and you can't expect them to if they're in the right, to back off. We're not going to. And the other thing is, escalating things you're never going to win. You're never going to win on the street. You're not, because what's going to happen is we're going to call for more police,
right,
and more police,
right,
and more police, and it's just going to get bad. So that is not a good strategy to have. If you feel you were wrong, the best thing to do is be professional.
Right.
As hard as that may be, being caught up in the emotion of the moment. Because when I was undercover, I did get pulled over, profiled, 100%. 100%. Right. Now, I was fortunate enough that I had avenues that I could address that real quick when I needed to. Others don't trust the system of the accountability within police departments. And I get that based on some of the things that happen in this nation and the narrative that's out there. But I'm telling you, every police department in Delaware that I know of, and there's 48 of us, I think, 48 different police departments in the state of Delaware. I know most of the chiefs because we were in the trenches together.
Right.
And accountability is everything for us with our officers. So if you call in and your complaint's legitimate and valid, and you present us, like, one thing we're going to do is pull our body warrants. But if you have footage too, send that to us, and we'll be more than happy to address whatever it may be. And in my career, I'll be honest with you, I've had to arrest officers. I've had plenty of them discipline fired. I mean, we're held to a higher standard. That's for a reason. We've been entrusted and empowered, to have the ability to take people's rights away, and there's a lot that comes with that. And
to protect and to serve.
Yes, and we're given a lot of tools to do that. So with that comes a higher level of responsibility and accountability to our communities. Right. And I think the communities, I understand that the trust is not there, but with the youth, if they feel they've been wronged, or anybody out there, if you've ever been pulled over by the police and you feel that you've been wronged, file that complaint.
No doubt.
File the complaint. And if you don't get what you want out of that complaint, or if you think you're being blown off, there's plenty of politicians that will champion that cause for you.
Yes.
Go to your councilman. Go to your senator. Go to wherever you need to go to get the accountability that you want. But I will tell you that, like with my police department at the University of Delaware, you can feel free. Like we publish our arrest log. Some of that's federally mandated. The other thing we do that we're not federally mandated is we're probably the most transparent police department in the state of Delaware, meaning you can go on our website and you can see how many people we've pulled over.
Wow.
You can see the race of the person pulled over, the age of the person pulled over, the race of the officer that pulled them over, and how many years experience they have, and whether there was an arrest made or a warning given. And we break it all the way down. And you can look at the demographics of our department. Like we break down our whole police department from the chief all the way down. You can see every race, age, and of us. So we are very, very transparent, and that's to build trust with our community.
Of course, and that sounds like a great tool to have.
Yeah, that's one of the big things. Now I know we got to wrap this up, but I can sit here and talk to you guys for hours.
Man,
about
I can
cop
listen
stuff.
to you for hours. And I really appreciate you taking your time out to your busy schedule. Anytime we can empower our youth, we appreciate it. And so we really appreciate having you on here, Officer Pires, and it's a pleasure. And hopefully we will have you again.
Yeah, I will come back anytime. And I truly love, and I've been trying to find some avenues. Obviously, with the university, I have a lot to do there as far as my commitment to that community because, as I said, I mentor the basketball team. I spend some time with some of the other athletes and some of the other students. I have some good relationships with some of the frats and everybody. But I love giving back to the community. And even though I'm a downstate kid, I'm a country boy, I still would love to come up here and help anytime I can. And maybe we could set some things up and get some of the youth out to the university and I can show them my world.
Most definitely.
And show them the potential.
We would love to have you, and we would love to come there.
That'd be great, because then we could show them, hey, you can achieve this.
Yes.
Introduce them to a couple players.
No doubt. Wow. Well, Officer Pires, we want to thank you once again for taking your time out of your busy schedule, for sharing a lot of yourself. I know it wasn't always easy, maybe talking about some of the things. Some of the things did put a smile on your face. You talk about the success stories and things of that nature. Please come back again.
Love to.
And
maybe then I can remember one of those SWAT stories for you. I can't think of one right now. I apologize.
Maybe so, but we just really want to thank you for taking the time and sharing with our youth, and just hoping that we inspire the youth to keep pushing and do great things and make the best of your life. And don't be afraid to challenge yourself. That's the one key thing that I always tell the youth. Don't be afraid to challenge yourself. And remember this: choices, decisions, and consequences. You always have the choice to make the best choice for yourself. And it didn't really come out the way I wanted it, but I loved y'all anyway. Until the next time, take care.
Thank you for having me, Orlando. I appreciate it, brother.
This has been the Gang Culture Podcast, brought to you by The Cause and produced by the youth of The Cause production crew. Produced by Scott Michaels and Dennis Finnecauer. Program manager is Darby Putney Vashis. Video and audio edited by Louis Navarrete. Hosted by Orlando Foreman. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for a new episode dropping next week. Please don't forget to leave us a review wherever you're listening.